Joseph, let me ask you this thing that's been on my mind. You're such a great, your mind is so curious, and you're a great curator in that you're always looking to see what other people do. And sometimes making something out of it in terms of a presentation or in performance, and sometimes just knowing and telling people, sharing what you see. And then you have this other side of your own work. You do these amazing writing pieces that you perform. How do these two sides of your creativity coexist? Is there a conflict between them in terms of time, in terms of energy?
It feels a little selfish actually on the curating side because, oh God, I can't believe I'm saying this. It's like I have to control people to make something. And I feel guilty for doing that.
Why do you feel guilty?
Well, it's like being a director, I suppose. Like I'm less a curator than just a director because I want to make something very specific happen. And I think what a real curator does is they approach something from an art historical perspective and they cherry pick for examples of some sort of predetermined context. And I almost wish, because the people I end up working with are people that are either heroes of mine or people who I've admired from afar. Well, that would be hero, wouldn't it? Like either friends like heroes that became friends, or people I haven't worked with who I just feel like are on some sort of parallel plane. I almost want to commission work that I think they need to make in order to fulfill my vision, and so in that way, I feel like I'm being very kind of Machiavellian and directorial rather than curatorial, because curators are very passive. Okay. This is more of like, I'm telling you what to do in a very Cyrano de Bergerac way.
Well, it's exactly how Diaghilev used to work with Picasso and Stravinsky as an as an impresario. He had a very clear idea. It's like, I want you to write about Russian spring, and I want you to do primitive da-da-da. He would really be aggressive about working with these seminal creative forces with his vision. But he had a clear idea of what he saw in their work and what would work, in this case, on stage. Is what you are saying that you have some clear thoughts about what you see in these people's work that you want other people to see?
Yeah. Oh, God. I mean, you almost get inside their head when you form a friendship. Obviously, whenever you form a friendship with someone, you are inside their head.
So what you're doing is based on friendship?
Yeah, always. Like the people I want to work with, I want to be friends with them first so that I kind of understand where they're coming from and I can be sure. And then I want to be comfortable enough directing them as a friend to make something beautiful.
That's interesting. I don't think...
But the thing is, that's not curating. That's...
Right.
It's kind of a really... If it didn't come from a generous place, it would be called manipulative. Because I do have an end I'm looking at. Like I have like this vision of a beautiful experience.
It depends on what the generosity is, because you want to share what you see with others. I mean, explain what that generosity is.
I just want to... I can only think of examples like Tae-Ching Shea is a hero. He's this guy in the late 70s and early 80s. Just you know who he is, obviously, but for those who don't, a Korean immigrant at the time, illegal immigrant who had come to America, was experiencing like a massive amount of disenfranchisement, and so he devised these endurance, monk-like experiences for himself that would last a year, that would test his stamina, it would test everything. He lived in a jail cell that he constructed in his studio for a year without television, books, any sort of outside entertainment. He instructed an intern, a friend, to bring him food and water for a year, and he lived there and very sparsely documented this. And the year after that, this is the piece I enjoyed and I curated into a show because it spoke to me. It was like the most brutal depiction of time as a line, as a linear experience that I'd ever seen. He had a punch clock. It was like that you would find at a job in the early 80s, like, ching, ching, make that sound, And he hooked it up to this 16 millimeter camera that would take one frame with every punch. Actually click, because he had like a handheld clicker. And you could see the clock here and the hands and everything. And he shaved his head at the beginning of the year, and he set this task where I'm going to punch this clock once an hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days. Without sleeping, really, without leaving this place, leaving this general vicinity, because I'm bound to it by this promise. And the resulting film is when I put that next to like what a lot of people would call art, would frame as art, they're not the same. And so I'm wondering, okay, well, you know, I want to put something that it was considered art by the art world now, but it took a while for people to kind of like turn on to that. I think the first people that turned on to it were more anthropologists than art critics or anything. So
your enthusiasm to bring word of this kind of work to a bigger audience is what fuels you, your enthusiasm for showing what you see in it?
I don't know where it comes from. I've always wanted to put on a show. I think some of the best art I ever did was when I was like 13, when I would record my little sister. Like, my little sister's 7 years younger than me, and one thing we found out very early is she could sing in this Cookie Monster voice on pitch. Like, she could literally, like, you know, they always said Kurt Cobain could scream on pitch.
Yeah.
Amanda could like intone any kind of guttural heavy metal cookie growl filtered through a 6-year-old larynx perfectly.
That's interesting. So you're saying this whole performative side of things, this show, rather than passive object sitting on the wall, really...
It's a show. It's always
really
a show.
Gets you going.
Yeah. As it should be. It should be that way. I mean, if art can't... I mean, you know, there's this whole...
Finish that thought. If art can't
entertain, then it's failing. And, you know, I think when I go to the Met and I'm in the midst of Renaissance sculpt, the high Renaissance, you know, hell, if I'm in front of like Picasso or any of the Impressionists,
it's entertaining in a very high way.
That's fucking entertaining.
Yeah, in a very...
What's not entertaining is watching somebody who has a modicum of understanding about any media, who has a really nerdy ass understanding of French post-structuralist theory and like Chris Kraus books and like pithy comments in art magazines, coming in and strategizing about, well, how can I add to a slacker minimalist dialogue about all of these ideas that I've had a kind of a smattering of contact with. How can I, you know, it's like, how can I be a part of that party? That's all artists like that are doing. It's like, how can I be a part of that party? Yeah. And they're not doing anything else. It's not art.
Yeah, well, it strikes me when you talk about not doing anything else, when you strike, you know, one of the qualities of entertainment is you walk out like delighted and changed and happy and different, and
I don't walk out of those.
And it's like, I don't necessarily think a lot of people feel that when they walk out of a gallery show that they dip into for a minute on a Thursday night and just kind of look.
Not, it's rare, but I have.
Yeah.
I have had that experience. Actually, it's funny, like some of those experiences that I value the most were very rare, granted, but they did happen in galleries, and so I think that's why like I keep going right now. I mean, I may tire of it pretty damn soon, but like right now I'm still excited by the art world. And the possibility that particular social space in Western civilization allows. It's kind of the only space we have left in America anyway, where you can fuck with meaning. You know what I mean? Like, you actually can, within the art world, talk about, well, let's change the meaning of this word. Let's change the meaning of this idea by presenting enough compelling pieces of intellectual furniture for the bourgeoisie to think about and maybe buy, and with their money change the direction of the flow of ideas. What a slow ass way of making progress, but that's kind of what's happening.
Yeah.
You know?
I want to return to your own work though, because I've been hearing you do more of it. And you know, I've heard a lot of poetry and spoken word and performed language pieces, and your stuff is amazing. I mean,
thanks.
is that going to keep growing? Is that going to supplant this curation thing that you do? I mean,
It's not different than it at all. It's just, you know, oh, what was I going to say?
keep going.
So you're asking, like, how is my curating different than writing poetry?
I've
It's
been
not
hearing
different.
more of your work. I see the notes that you take for your work. Your own development as your own creative artist. Where are we in a year or two with that?
Well, that sketchbook you saw, like, the kernels for the seed of an idea of a show, an exhibition in an art gallery are the same pages that I pull from and edit from for these weird protracted pieces of prose. They're not really poetry, it's just kind of like this weird quilt of criticism and observation. They all come from the same place, and I think, like...
So there's not this big difference for you between artists whom you curate and your own work as a creator? I'm always interested in why people stay here when things are changing fast and it's harder to live.
Because of because of it's funny this because of the
connections that come, yes.
That doesn't happen in Nashville, at least in an interesting way. Shit, I can't put that on here. It's true though. You know, people take bigger chances here, and you hear from them.
And there are more different kinds of people here, aren't there?
You know what I mean?
Sounds like a great
People,
style.
and you know, it brings up something. It's like people don't fucking collaborate in the suburbs.
Yeah.
They fear each other.
Well, that's
When you live on top of each other so much, you kind of are forced into a situation where it's like, I'm either gonna like have to commit suicide, go on a mass murdering spree, or fucking learn to live with other people.
Well,
And luckily,
that's what
most
separate houses and separate lawns and separate yards were meant to do, keeping people in their own little
compartments.
Yeah. So you're saying collaboration is also part of it here. This ambition.
It's by necessity.
Saw here in the 70s, which was, you know, the possibility of beauty or violence or transformation at any moment in any day, where you still saw that here now.
I don't know if I romanticize it like that. It's romantic, isn't it? That the way of looking at New York. I look at it, and it's weird. Like, in terms of mortality, like there's always these stories of death all around you in New York. Like from the guy that got like in a fight getting off of the Bedford stop and getting shoved onto the tracks and dying. Like that's around from a perspective of mortality. And from a perspective of utilitarian need, it's like I need to make this film. I need to make this show. This is what I need to do. But the old way of kind of like the beatnik way of looking at New York is like, oh, we're all kind of like down and out and destitute. We're just gonna powwow together and like collectively birth this feeling that's just gonna like splay itself out like a big coffee shop or something. It's like that's not where I come from.
No.
I mean I feel that need for that community, but I've been such a nerd my whole life. I guess I kind of gave up on it somewhere along the way.